your powers are weak, old man.
You can't win, Darth. If you strike me down, I shall become more base than you can possibly imagine.
I don't hope the game is bad or that it doesn't sell well. That's not even on my mind. I'm talking about what I see in the trailer, and what I think it spells for the game and the future of the series. I have never said, nor will I ever say, that people aren't allowed to like Samus Returns or Dread, as if I have the power to stop anyone from enjoying those games. I don't think anything I say is going to reach Nintendo or change anything about Metroid. I've literally just been voicing my thoughts in video format. The worst damage I could do to Nintendo is to stop buying Metroid games. Here's what I am saying. This game has a chance of being awesome. If and only if the trailers were showing us the most boring part of the game, we could be in for a real treat. What I don't want to see is another mostly linear action platformer with optional light exploration in the vein of Samus Returns. Give me new, memorable environments, new music, and a game that uses exploration to drive its progression, and I'll be a happy camper. Alright, with all that bullshit out of the way, let's look at some common responses to my last video.
And destroy them.
Convenience. My use can. Scan pulses like map stations.
Alright, map stations didn't reveal the whole map. There were still hidden areas you had to uncover yourself. Also, they usually weren't available right away upon entering a new area. You usually had to do a bit of exploring to find them in the first place. That's completely different than the scan pulse. The scan pulse gives you a giant chunk of your surrounding area with the touch of a button. That's like one step away from giving you the whole map from the start. If you think the way the map was handled in prior games was too hard or confusing, I got some news for you. A recent game, Hollow Knight, made you find the cartographer, that game's equivalent of the map stations, before you could even see the map at all. And I'd argue that makes exploration that much more rewarding. The game, God forbid, is asking something of the player. You have to use your memory to navigate, and you have to be careful, because if you die, there's no guarantee you'll find the way back to your corpse to regain your money. It adds tension to your exploration, something I feel like games have been lacking lately. I feel Metroid would benefit from this kind of tension.
Scan pulse is like Super Metroid X-ray visor.
Firstly, the X-ray visor in Super Metroid is found towards the end of the game, once you'd already done the bulk of your exploring. Secondly, the visor only showed you the identity of the exact block you're looking at. You had to stop moving and slowly pan across the screen with it. It was, dare I say, a little inconvenient. But that meant the player couldn't spam it. Therefore, they would likely only use it when a certain spot rouses their suspicion. The scan pulse is a completely different beast. It's given to you immediately at the start of the game, before you've even had a chance to see the world. All you have to do is run through an area and mash A, and suddenly, bright blue flashing auras appear around all the breakable blocks. As a result, you don't have to lift a finger to find the secrets. You can just spam A and the scan pulse will take care of the rest. Remember when games' secrets were actually, secret? There was an implicit statement made by the game. There's hidden goodies in this world. See if you can find them. With Samus Returns, it seems more like,
It's from Squidward to SpongeBob. Well, here you go.
the best it can do is sometimes give you a puzzle, but they're usually stupidly simple, not very satisfying to solve.
I'd rather not bomb every room.
Okay, I see how it is. So it's either bomb every block until you find the one obscure breakable one, or get the solution handed to you on a silver platter, with no in-between. Is that it? I don't want a horribly cryptic, obtuse game either. I want a carefully designed world that unravels naturally through the player's curiosity. There have been so many videos describing Super Metroid's genius invisible tutorial. I think any devs could learn a thing or two from that game. Hell, Mercury Steam now has access to the very mind that conceived that experience, so I expect better than, here's a tool that reveals all the secrets in the whole map. Good luck, have fun.
My fast travel.
I probably didn't go into enough detail in the video for this one, so here we go. I'm not against it as a concept, but in Samus Returns, fast travel serves as a band-aid for bad world design, and it makes the already forgettable world even less memorable, simply because you're spending less time in each area. It feels like the devs didn't want to worry about making their levels fun to traverse multiple times, so the world is just a bunch of lame obstacle courses. Alternatively, Prime's worlds are built for backtracking, featuring fun alternative paths and shortcuts unlocked over time, and newer, tougher enemies that spawn as the player gets stronger. I like how the absence of fast travel forces the game's designers to think about how they want the world to connect back on itself. It's a great feeling to discover a newer, easier way to get to a location. You get to know the lay of the land and the fastest routes to any given room. It's a feeling unlike any other in gaming. Fast travel could be improved if they made you earn it somehow. If it only opened up after you've killed so many Metroids, for instance, then you'd have to make the trek back to unlock the fast travel location. I just remember how difficult it was to fast travel in Earthbound, for instance. Firstly, you had to be in an area that allowed its use at all, and then you had to have enough space for you to activate it. If not, you were on your own for figuring out a way to get through an area. The goal here would be to force the developers to think about ways they could flesh out their world and make backtracking fun again.
Prime game's inconvenient. Backtracking bad. My ghosts and dark troopers were annoying.
Honestly, this is a small complaint and not a good case against backtracking as a concept. Firstly, even when you were in a room that turned into a firefight, you could usually just leave immediately. Secondly, and more importantly, the game still needs ways to be challenging when you become stronger. By the end, you can pretty much decimate any enemy in the game with a single shot, so they needed to give you something to challenge you a bit. I swear, players can't be fucked to lift a finger anymore. I guess you need a drawn-out, multi-cutscene tutorial for literally everything in the game. You know, you used to have to just press some fucking buttons to know what your character could do. These days, the bare minimum would be a small piece of text that tells you what a button does, and immediately fucks off. Leave me alone. I wanna feel. I'm honestly sick of games treating me like I just handed the controller to grandma. Once again, I'll bring up Hollow Knight, since after my last video you must be tired of hearing how much better AM2R is. The game actually respects your intelligence as a player. Its secrets are secret. Sure, breakable walls are kinda telegraphed, but it's subtle. You gotta keep your eyes out. Also, its bosses are fucking hard, and it takes genuine skill to beat them. It doesn't give you a parry trump card to carry you through. Basically, it doesn't hold your hand. It expects something of you in order to beat it, and that's one reason why it earns my respect.
Samus Returns did have themes to its areas. Look at all the stuff in the backgrounds.
I don't give a fuck what there was in the distant backgrounds of each level. We never get to actually interact with any of that shit, so it ultimately does nothing to help establish the theme of a given area. The level design could have taken place in any setting and still worked the same. Hollow Knight had area themes and actually implemented fun gimmicks that went with each theme. The Fungal Wastes had those bouncy mushrooms and the Mantis Lords. Green Path had those big bushy boys that you can chop down. The City of Tears had that aristocratic high-rise and the glass ceilings you can break through. And Deep Nest had webs everywhere and enemies infected with spider eggs. I didn't even talk about half the game's areas, all coming with their own shit to discover. Shit that's unique to each area and makes it stand out. In Samus Returns, aside from the one boss and the lame robot things that were in the original anyway, name one enemy that was unique to an area that really made an impact on you. Oh, but there were the fish in the water area.
Sit down!
Live lore scans in Prime. It slows down the game.
Look guys, you can actually see the brain cells colliding to try and justify this position. The lore in Prime is 100% optional. If optional lore were added to Samus Returns or Dread, and handled the same way Prime does it, it could only add to the immersion for those lore sluts, such as myself, who want that little bit extra. Its presence takes nothing away from players who don't want to read it.
Slope, 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 slope.
Good job!
I think Dread will be good.
Okay,
I liked Samus Returns.
okay.
You cannot tell someone they're wrong for liking a game.
Listen, if Samus Returns is your favorite Metroid game, I think you have shitty taste. More importantly, why do you care? If you like the game, you like the game. I'm not coming to your house and confiscating it from you.
AM2R looks like shit.
Wrong!
Prime games are worse because they're not as fun to speedrun. Immersion/atmosphere bad, lore bad, Tim bad.
Look, if speedrunning is your make or break, you've got some weird priorities in my opinion. I play Metroid for immersion, creativity, and a rich world to lose myself in. Sure, making speedrunning fun is a plus, but it's not my criteria for a good Metroid game.
You're biased and not objective cause you didn't talk about budget.
Budget doesn't really play into this. It's more a discussion of the fundamental game design taking place here. If Samus Returns looked the same, but it was built like an actual Metroid game, if it just put more effort into its world, and especially its music, I'd probably give it an easier time. If one guy on no budget can make a better remake of Metroid 2, including writing his own arrangements of the music, I expect better from the people being paid to do it working with a multi-million-dollar company. After my last video, I did a bit more thinking, and I discovered that the problem runs much deeper than the fact that Dread is using blocky tiles for its level design. When I first viewed the game in that trailer, I couldn't put my finger on it, but something was off. And I think I finally know what it is. We are using sophisticated 3D game engines and the full power of the Switch's hardware to make just another 2D Metroid. Aside from the killer robot, it looks like this game could have been made on the Game Boy or DS. And yeah, I know, Dread was originally planned for a DS release. It feels like there are arbitrary limitations put on the game when it could have been so much more. We're not really doing anything here that couldn't have been done a decade ago. I expected more ambition from the first new Metroid in nearly 2 decades on Nintendo's mainline console. I just wish I could have seen what a wide-open Metroid would look like, similar to Mario Odyssey or Breath of the Wild. With these super high-res models and backgrounds, it's like you're blue-balling me for what a 3D Metroid on Switch could have looked like. Let me show you what I mean. This scene here, for instance. The background is so enticing. I just want to step forward and explore it, but I know I can't because the game isn't built for that. It's like the backgrounds are some kind of zoo exhibit, where the game is telling you, look, don't touch.
Let me in! Let me in!
Now that I think of it, that was a problem in Samus Returns as well. Mercury's steam filled the foregrounds mostly with rock platforms and the same dull enemies over and over again, but gave the backgrounds so much detail it kinda hurts to look at. Imagine if that shit were actually in the foreground. The game would be so much more interesting. Let me ask you, what is the purpose of a background? In every other Metroid game, it's to provide a simple backdrop that allows you to focus on what's happening in the foreground. That's how backgrounds should work in 2D games. But these new games are different. Samus Returns and Dread are not 2D games. Their backgrounds go so deep and get so detailed that it makes you wish you could go back there and jump around and check things out. Again, you're like a tourist at a zoo exhibit. Instead of interacting with those interesting parts of the environment, you can only watch from a distance. What makes this a bit worse is that a lot of enemies are able to interact with the backgrounds, while you can't.
Right this way. Sorry to keep you waiting. Get out of here. This place is too tough for you, little man.
It's like Samus is cut off from moving by an invisible wall that she can't get through. Like, what are you supposed to think about these areas? Are you supposed to think of them as a 3D space or a 2D space? It's sitting in this uncanny middle ground where the background has more detail than the foreground, and the enemies can move forward and back, but the player is stuck on this one plane, and it's frustrating on some deep psychological level.
Hey, don't annoy that sign. It's dangerous. Can't you read that sign?
It's like the 3D Metroid Prime exploration part of my brain kicks in, but I can't do anything to satisfy it. When you're making a 2D game, you should be thinking in 2D space. That's why I think it's best to make 2D games with sprite art or hand-drawn animation. Not that 2.5D can't work, but don't do it like this. In an exploration-heavy game like Metroid, you shouldn't be putting more detail and variety into your backgrounds than your foregrounds. Not to mention, if you're not particularly paying attention to the backgrounds, like I wasn't, you're gonna walk away from Samus Returns unable to remember what the fuck you just saw. That's why I kept calling the world forgettable. Here's a thought. Perhaps the 2D perspective is holding Mercury's team back more than helping them. They're clearly talented at 3D modeling, so why not just give them the 3D playground that would best harness their strengths? It doesn't even have to be like Other M. If Mercury's team just took the best parts of that game, used that as a starting point, and built upon it, the sky's the limit. They'd have so much room to breathe. and the freedom to craft the world they've shown they really want to. But instead of that, or any other number of original ideas, we're making just another basic 2D Metroid with the same old metal boxes and cave environments. If Metroid should be anything, it shouldn't be just another game. When devs arbitrarily limit themselves like this just to be faithful to their roots or whatever, it's just disappointing to me. Like how with that Link's Awakening port on Switch, Nintendo didn't actually remake the game from the ground up. They literally just turned every sprite into an HD model and laid them out identically to the original. It feels extremely lazy, and faithfulness is a poor excuse. I'd rather they push games forward instead of holding the current gen back with dated game design. But hey, that's just me, I guess.
It's going to water Metroid down and makes it more shallow so they can bring in more fans.
Alright. It's time to get real. The last thing Metroid should be doing is targeting a casual audience. If you think it's better for Metroid to target non-fans while sacrificing its own identity on the altar of Nintendrones, instead of sticking to its signature genre, which it single-handedly defined, and catering to the fans first and foremost, which Retro proved is how you make an absolute masterpiece, then I think you are a very shallow individual. It's like telling Mexican restaurants they can't put spicy shit in their food because we need to bring in more people who don't like spicy food. It's like saying we need to fill Star Trek with a bunch of lens flares and more action scenes because normies would be bored by the routine intellectual discussion and lore. Oh, yeah, you should get my meaning by now. Funny thing happened that kinda vindicated some of my points from the previous video. Emplemon released a video talking about the near cult-like status that the Nintendo fandom has reached over the years. He actually echoed a lot of the same points from my The Fans section and brought some whole new arguments to the table. A lot of fans feel personally attacked when someone criticizes Nintendo or their favorite Nintendo games. The retaliatory manner in which they argue shows they've really invested a lot of emotion into it. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we grew up with this company. But there comes a time though that we need to fully grow up and stop treating them like some kind of family member defending their destructive habits. Even saying shit like, I just want to see Nintendo succeed, carries this unhealthy amount of loyalty to a company that ultimately doesn't care about you. I don't care if Nintendo made a lot of good games that I played in my childhood. I ultimately have no interest in whether the current Nintendo does well. My childhood is behind me. I see them for what they are. Just another vendor offering a product to me. They're not my friend, so I'm not theirs. I don't hope for their success as they don't care about me either way. Good games will come and go like the tide. So who cares whether it's Nintendo, or Mojang, or Naughty Dog, or any of the countless indie game studios, or even random Joes on the internet who bring you those games. Don't handcuff yourself to the mast of the Nintendo ship, because one day that ship might sink. Tim Deuces out.
This map upgrade allowed me to see more about the map, but you can see that there's still a lot of obscurity here. You need to explore in order to uncover more of the area.
Yes!